Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to this public virtual meeting of the Licensing and Safety Committee. Please, the meeting is being broadcast and recorded. In order to clarify for anyone watching this meeting, we will address attendance first so that everyone is clear who is taking part. Members of the committee, please turn on your microphone only and confirm you are present when your name is called. Anyone who does not respond will be recorded as giving their apology.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Porter.
Present.
Councillor Brossard.
Present.
Councillor Allen.
Present.
Councillor Atkinson. Okay, Councillor Barnard.
Present.
Councillor Brown. Oh, she's given her apologies. Councillor Brunner Walker.
Present.
Councillor Finch.
Present.
Councillor Musgore.
Present.
Councillor Badebo.
Present.
Councillor Mrs. Ingham.
Present.
Councillor Kirk.
Present.
Councillor Mrs. Mackenzie Boyle.
I've got apologies for Mrs. Mackenzie Boyle.
Oh, yeah, so have I. Sorry, thank you. And Councillor Tullett.
Present.
Thank you. I think we also have Councillor Temperton on the call. Is that correct?
Correct. Thank you.
Chairman, are you happy with that?
Yep, I'm happy with that. Thank you.
Great. And I think we've also just
Councillor Harrison.
Oh, hello, Councillor Harrison. Thank you very much. I think we've also just had Councillor Atkinson just join as well. Are there any other members I've missed off?
Councillor Leake.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Leake. Thank you. Yep. I think that's everyone. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The next item is declaration of interest. The full text for declarations of interest is set out on the agenda at item 2. If any councillors have a disclosable pecuniary interest or an affected interest to declare, please indicate in the meeting's chat and I will come to you in turn. Thank you. There seems to be no interest indicated. So agenda item 3 is to approve as a correct record the minutes of the last committee meeting on the 22nd of October 2020. Before I move that they are accepted, please indicate in the meeting's chat if you have any issue with the accuracy. Okay. Councillor Brossard, are you happy to second their acceptance?
I am, Chairman.
Thank you. Nobody has indicated that they have any issues, therefore I take those as agreed. Agenda item 4 is consideration of any urgent items. Are there any?
Not that I'm aware of, Chair.
Thank you. Agenda item 5 is public participation. Do we have any members of the public who wish to speak?
Yep, again, nothing in the committee Dropbox, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. The next agenda item is the statement of licensing policy. And I believe, Julia, you're presenting. And if you're not there, then it should be Sean.
Sorry, Chairman. Yes, I am presenting. I was just having trouble unmuting myself.
Okay, over to you, Julia.
Thank you very much. Yes, this is to bring back the committee to you, the report to you regarding the review of the statement of licensing policy, which I'm sure members will recall receiving back in October. We have since then put the draft policy out to consultation with all the statutory consultees as required, together with the trade and all the other people that we had agreed to consult with. The draft policy has been back through the executive, and we have received consultation responses from members of the executive, members of the Licensing and Safety Committee, so I would thank you for those. And that was about it. We didn't receive any from external agencies. The main amendments that have been made to the policy that you've got in front of you is a further comprehensive scheme of delegations, which has been added. The removal of wording referring to the council as it restricts our position and insertion instead of reference to the licensing authority. Some of the paragraphs have been reworded for clarity. Also, the addition of wording for the prevention of crime and disorder to include applicant guidance on terrorism threat, risk assessment refusals, log for those intoxicated, and also additional wording to cover the situation after Brexit. We did then send all these comments to James Button, the solicitor that we had asked initially to have a look at the policy. He has come back with a couple more items, which if, with Chairman's permission, if I can just go through, which won't take very long, there are only, as I say, a couple of them. The point 2.1, which is the approach of the policy, James Button has suggested that the approach we're talking about here relates to premises licenses, but he's suggesting that we also add in some wording along the fact that the policy refers to also club premises certificates and temporary event notices. So that was on that bit there. He has, in addition, suggested that we, on section 3.5, in terms of large-scale events, we had originally just referred to events as large events. So he was suggesting that we put either large event or large-scale event, and has suggested, in fact, we put large-scale event, as that emphasises the size, and the policy has been amended to reflect that. However, if the committee would like us just to put events, then we can change that back again. He has also suggested adding in some words on section 9.5, which is in relation to representations, on item D, which is just to make it clear that the police only can object to the change of a DPS. And has also added a additional paragraph just below 12.9, which relates to objections to 10, just to make it clear that these can only be made by the police and environmental health department. The final thing is also in Annex B, which is the neighbourhood notification, was to take out the section which said the licensing officer will use judgment in circumstances. So he's suggesting that either that discretion needs to be more detailed or actually just removed, and just to leave the rest of it in there, which is about the notification simply in accordance with the geographical location. That, Chairman, is it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Julia. Do any members have any questions? If you do, please raise your hand in the chat. Mary.
Hello, thank you. On the papers that I saw at the executive last night, on page, the 3.6 was missing. Is there a 3.6 been included? It went from 3.5 to 3.7 or something. 3.6 wasn't there.
I can just have a look.
There's nothing on my one in 3.6.
No, that was removed.
Well,
I'm just looking at the comments here. That was removed, but unfortunately the wording was removed, but unfortunately it appears we didn't remove the number.
Okay, thank you. So
3.7 will become 3.6.
Yes.
Okay. Can I also ask then on page 20, at the end of paragraph 810, should it say aged at least 16 or 17 with the words at least put in? 8, 10.
That's all 20 persons under 18. So sorry, where were you wanting to put at least?
Should say aged at least 16 or 17, the words at least in front.
That? Yep, if that's what,
Well,
Chairman,
I'm not allowed to vote, but I just think it makes it clearer because it means it's at least that and then it goes above it. Thank you. That's all, Chairman.
Thank you. There's also been something in the chat saying that 9.4 and 9.5 are also missing.
okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, can I suggest on this numbering issue that obviously after tonight we will tidy that up before it goes to council. What's happened is it's been through so many incarnations, as you know, that we just need to sort out the numbers.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry about
Thank you,
that. I
Sean.
apologise.
No worries. Councillor
Chairman.
Madibo.
Oh,
Councillor Madibo.
Good evening, Chair. Thank you. On page 7, 5.5, can you hear me? Can you all hear
We
me?
can hear you, Michael.
Oh, cool. 5.5. What type of premises does this apply to? Is there a number? Does it have to be, I don't know, if you had 10 people, why would you want to have this anti-terrorism thing?
I think the suggestion was just in there that if it was appropriate, that we've got something in there to do with terrorism. So it's very much a police-led risk assessment and the threat. So I think it's to do with a risk assessment, and if it is felt that whatever premises you have with however many people it would need to be, then one would need to be done and you would need to consider it.
Yeah, what I'm trying to get clear is, should we have, I mean, if you had a premises that only, for example, allowed 10 people, why would you want to go through this terrorist assessment? And I don't know how much would it cost to do this? And also, what do you need to demonstrate that you've actually done it?
I would think it would be like a health and safety risk assessment, but in terms of a terrorist and threat risk assessment, I'm sure the police would be able to help and give guidance on how that will be done. In fact, I believe we have seen some when it's been raised at some of our major events. So I don't think it needs to cost very much at all. And I think it would, again, I think it would depend on the premises, in fact, because depending on 10 people, which 10 people it may be relevant, or whether those 10 people may be, if they're in an open space that might be liable to a terrorist threat, then again it might be something that would need to be considered.
Okay, thank you. On 5.6.
Michael, can I just interrupt there, Michael? Can you please turn on your camera? Can members please turn on their cameras before they start speaking, please? Thank you.
Can you see me? Oops.
Yes.
I have lost my questions. Okay, on 5.6, would the log that you're asking people to keep, what should it contain data-wise?
It would contain enough data to identify the individual who was being refused, but that doesn't necessarily mean it needs to contain personal information like addresses, telephone numbers, that kind of thing. or if it does contain some personal information, it would have to be made sure that it was done in a very secure manner and in accordance with the premises policies on data protection.
No, what I'm trying to, we need to be clear what we want people to collect. The reason why I ask this is, if you refuse me alcohol or something, the chances of you getting anything from me is 0. Right? So I don't understand. You will just say, well, a guy that looks 24 years old. Is that enough as a log?
No, we would normally, or more than that, in terms of actually who it is. A lot of the people would be known to the premises. Certainly at the minute with track and trace, they potentially will be known. But we need to be able to identify them so that, and the premises need to be able to identify them so that if needs be, they can be refused again if they're a persistent offender of coming in, for example, of underage sales.
Yeah, I'm struggling, but.
Chair, could I?
Yeah, Sean, if you'd like to interject.
So I mean, lots of premises, in fact, all premises have some sort of log of this nature already in existence, and we would expect to see that in the event of any kind of, for example, underage sales incident, or basically when we carry out inspections of them. The type of thing that normally appears in there would be things like obviously the date, the time, maybe a description. They don't normally contain personal details of who the person is, the reason why the sale was refused, who refused the sale, and then any other kind of commentary. What we do have, though, as a service is we do have templates for these things that we can actually provide businesses with and make available to businesses. I mean, the vast majority of obviously national businesses and chains have these things in place, but for the smaller businesses, we can actually assist them with these templates.
Thank you. On 8.6b, after Brexit, Switzerland is not in the EU and also is not EEA member. Should we specifically add the word Switzerland as part of that list, or are they excluded?
I think that would be something for members to decide, Chairman.
Okay, we'll make a note of that. 8.6, you say?
Yeah, 8.6b. I think we're still friendly with Switzerland.
Okay, yep.
On 9.1, it says remove. The council has adopted the neighborhood notification policy. And there was a side note attached to that says there's a standard notification policy thing. Do we have something else to replace this particular clause? Annex B.
I believe this was one that was proposed to remove, but in fact it was reinserted at the request of members. So basically, sorry, the word remove should be removed, I believe.
Okay. Thank you.
Reinserted. Thank you.
Yes, wonderful. And my last, if I may, Chair, thank you very much for your patience.
Yeah.
Is there's seemed to be a lot of on 6.3, 7.5, 8.16. There's a line or a sentence that says this is not an exhaustive list, and applicants must ensure that their approach is tailored to the specific nature of the premises and activities. Could we make that a little bit clearer? I get what you're trying to say, that the list you provide in these places are not exhaustive. So it's not like a checklist and say, well, I've done all that. It's just trying to reward it so that it makes it a little bit clearer to actually say, this is just an example list, if that makes sense.
Yep, that was the wording that our solicitor gave us, but we're more than happy if you would like us to reword that. We can do that.
Yeah, please. I think the solicitor was using too many legal stuff here. We need to simplify it a little bit. Thank you very much. That's me done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Councillor Allen.
Just firstly on that last point from Michael, actually, I think the solicitor's comment is quite correct as it stands. My comment initially goes back to Julia's list that she was going through various points, and I have to say they didn't seem to be matching what I've got in mod.gov at all. Like you mentioned a 12.9, and I can't even, section 12 ends at 12.4. So I'm not quite sure where you got a 12.9 from. 2.1 didn't have any comments from James Button in it, so I'm not quite sure where you got that from. And literally, I was really struggling as you went through each of your points, trying to find things in the papers that match what you were saying.
Okay, apologies, Councillor Allen. The points that I added at the end are not in the document that you've got, because Jim Button only came back very late on with these additions that he thought would be useful to go in the policy. So I was adding them into they should collate to the numbers that are in the policy that you have.
But you mentioned at 12.9, and I say our section ends at 12.4. So what happened to 12.5, 6, 7, 8?
That's a very interesting question.
And if you've got that many extra paragraphs, what are they?
I can't, I've lost them now at the minute. Hold on. Bear with me. I've managed to lose 12. Sorry. Bear with me a second.
If it's any help, my documentation following next point, it's Ian Leake speaking. The documentation I'm looking at goes up to 12.4.
Yeah, that's what I said, 12.4.
Yeah, 12.4.
And then it goes to 13 temporary event notices.
Yeah.
Whether there's been a renumbering problem there.
Yeah, that is interesting, because the copy I've got.
But there was other paragraphs where you mentioned things, and the paragraph number you mentioned, and then the description you put against that paragraph didn't match what the paragraph was talking about. So I was getting very, very confused as you went through your initial talk.
Okay, the copy I have, I don't know if Sean or you got a copy, Sean or Neve, on you, but the copy I have has got 12.8 on it, which is
Wow.
Which is not.
No, sorry, Julie, I don't have that copy.
Do you mind if I intervene, Chair? From memory, the last time we saw this, there was a lot of paragraphs that were being moved around. And obviously this has been a cleaned up document, so it's quite possible that those paragraphs that were moved have actually been renumbered elsewhere. Just a thought.
It just makes it very difficult to know what we're approving here.
Understood,
Yeah.
understood. And that was going to be one of my points as well, so agree.
Ian Link speaking. The references made there to a 12.8. What does actually 12.8 actually say in your document?
Right, that's the one I'm having trouble now finding. Right, okay. So,
Damien, do you want to comment on this, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think Julia's looking at a document which was provided by our solicitor. We are looking at the document which is on mod.gov, which is the correct document to be looking at and deciding on this evening. There have been some significant changes, both from what you've seen last in October when the policy came through to you and the consultation that has been done. There have been significant number of paragraphs that have been moved. The document that you've got in mod.gov is the right one to review. I think, Julia, you just need to perhaps cross-reference the additional comments that have come in post consultation from our solicitor to the document that we're looking at on mod.gov, and that will give you the right information.
Okay, thanks, Damien. In which case, please ignore the numbering on those items then. I apologise, I don't quite know how I've managed to pick up the wrong document.
But then it just makes it a little difficult trying to translate your comments that you made in your initial talk to how they relate to the documents in mod.gov and what paragraphs you're trying to modify.
Right, okay. So would you like me to go through them again, Chair?
If it's possible.
If it's possible to go through them and actually go through the, without mentioning, I would actually mention the subsection. So rather than saying 12.9, just say it will appear in section 12.
Right, okay.
Hopefully members will be a bit more clearer of where they're actually going to appear.
Okay, so in the licensing principles and processes, which is section 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it talks about the council, which is the first section, is the council being the licensing authority under the Act and is responsible for granting premises licenses, etc., etc. Yes?
Yeah.
You all on that one?
Yeah.
Okay. So what he is suggesting that we add on to that bit is, in general, the policy refers to premises licenses, but the same principles will be relevant and be applied in relation to club premises certificates and temporary event notices, subject to modifications required by the legislation.
So will that be a new point, or will that be?
No, that was just an addition, which is entirely up to you, because it is just trying to clarify that although the policy in its entirety refers to all of these premises, but is just adding the fact that they're included as well. So rather than just talking about general premises licenses, it's sort of reminding people that it includes club premises certificates and also temporary event notices, which are also relevant to premises. But we can leave it out if members are happier to do that.
So I suspect, looking at 2 as printed, as published, that the members have got before them tonight, I suggest that would be a new paragraph that would go in at 2.11. Because effectively it's a mop-up, basically, of everything that foregoes in section 2. So effectively to extend the principles of the licensing policy to cover those areas that Julie has just talked about.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Please, Julia.
Okay, thank you. Right, the next one was to look at the wording around large-scale events.
That one did actually match up and did make sense.
Right, fabulous. Okay, thank you for that. Okay. So then the next bit, which I was talking about, was to do with representations, which was on number 9, well, what I was looking at, 9.5. Is that, so it's to do with representations.
Yeah, so the document we have does not have a 9.4 and not or a 9.5.
Right, so the
just correctly, that my one on page 21, there is 9.4 and 9.5 at the bottom.
Oh, sorry. Okay, 9.6 and 9.7 are before 9.4 and 9.5. My apologies. That's why I couldn't find it.
Okay, and I think that's because some of those have been taken out. So what he's suggesting here is that it's just adding to make sure it's only the police can object to a change of designated premises supervisor or DPS. So that was just an addition on the end of that.
Yeah, I'm assuming that Sean and Juliet, we will be tidying up this paper so that we don't have 9.5, sorry, 9.6, 9.7
Yes.
before 4
Absolutely.
and 5.
Yeah.
Yes,
And if the committee is minded to accept that recommendation from the solicitor, that we'll add that in at the relevant point in section 9, just to make that clear about the representations. As Chair, if I could apologise for the formatting. I mean, this has been a bit of a journey for this document, and it's been reformatted many times. But we will make sure basically that everything's put back into place.
Yeah, I'm a bit surprised that the executive didn't pick up on this last night, so that you were forewarned. So you know, it's well done to this committee to actually pick up on these, but it's a shame that the executive didn't pick up on it last night either. Julia, something that was going to be added to section 12.
Right, okay. So section 12 is to do with temporary event notices.
Section 13.
So,
sorry, section 13.
In our numbering, it's section 13.
Okay, so the section to do with temporary notices,
right,
whichever number it is when it comes out of, it was just an additional paragraph to be inserted to reflect the differences between premises licenses and TENS. So, and this is to say that the objections to TENS can only be made by police and environmental health department only on the 4 licensing objectives, which is different to premises licenses, which can be objected to by all the responsible authorities and interested parties. So that was just
and Chair, looking at the version that we're looking at, I suggest that goes in as a new 13.6, and we move the rest up. That would be the logical place to put it, based on the document that's before the committee. If that's accepted.
If you're tidying it up, then yes, please.
Yeah. Okay.
Chairman, I'm sorry to interject, but can we just go back to those, the TENS notices, because I'm looking at the modern.gov document and I don't recognise the words that have just been spoken. So just to make sure I'm looking at the same one, could you read?
No, I think these are new points that are going to be added onto the policy, Ian. So they're not actually on our sheet, on our papers. They're new points being raised and added to the policy.
Effectively, it's 13.9, Ian.
Yeah. There's a new paragraph going to be added at 13.9. And that's what Julia's pointed out, that we're going to be adding additional information onto our policy. So it won't actually be on your papers at present. It's a new paragraph being added.
I see.
Okay.
I'm happy with that down, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Allen. Councillor Tullett, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've lost my thread. However, being pedantic, can I go back to a point? It wasn't one of my original, but it was raised by Councillor Temperton when she was talking about the phrase at least 16 or 17. That you can't have both. It's either at least 16 or at least 17, or it's 16 and over or 17 and over, whichever way you want to do it. But you can't have a definitive with a variant after it.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Tullett.
Right, one more. With regards to, again, I was going to raise it myself, but I think Councillor Badibo covered most of it, and it's to do with the terrorism assessment. This is an open question, actually. Would that terrorism assessment relate to the national terrorism threat level? So would it be a different type of assessment dependent on the national threat level?
Sure.
I would imagine it would be basically dependent on a lot of factors, national threat level, but also local advice, local intelligence. I mean, this is a clause that's put in there, basically urging venue operators, I'm guessing, Julia, to cooperate with the police when needed.
But on the same point that Councillor Badibo raised, how do they know that if we're talking about, I think you said it's similar to health and safety, well, they have to be suitable and sufficient. So, you know, what is a suitable assessment and how sufficient does it have to be? And I think that was a similar point that was raised by Councillor Badibo. And I'm of the same, I've written that down previously. It's vague. And my third point is also about vagueness as well. So it's sort of, I just think that it needs to be tightened up as to exactly what you're expecting.
Is it possible to go back to James Button and just get a bit more meat on the bone on that, please?
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
I mean, maybe it needs to say something like in consultation with the police, something like that.
That would be better.
That effectively, because obviously everything would almost need to be tailored, I suspect, to individual premises, and it would be then about discussions about what additional measures you might want to put into place depending on what the threat risk was. So, I mean, maybe if we amend the wording to the effect of in consultation with, you know, police and other agencies to carry out X assessments or whatever it may be, something along those lines.
Absolutely, because I think at the end of the day, it's leaving too much to the individual to come up with some nebulous, you know, sort of type of assessment and then having it rejected on the basis it's not suitable and sufficient. So I think that would do the trick. And my final point is, again, it's on vague commentary when you, it's page 15 or, it's actually item 4.6, but I think these sort of things come up before. It's the phrase staff need to be properly trained. Terms like properly doesn't actually mean a lot. And even if you look in the comment alongside it, encouraging applicants to consider the need for staff training is one thing, but it then says particular training may relate to any of the licensing objectives. Well, you know, do we want them to receive training or don't we? And what sort of training do we want them to actually achieve? It's what level of training. The word properly doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, can I suggest on that? I understand your point, Councillor Tullett. I think maybe what we're trying to say, and maybe we go back and look at the wording on that as well, is that a wording, because effectively what we're talking about is having staff trained to a level where the licence holder can discharge their lawful, you know, duties in effect, basically in the application of the Act. So we go away and look at so I think it's something about basically that staff are trained to a level where basically they, you know, that they play their part in ensuring the licence holder fulfills their legal obligations. So we'll go away and look at the wording of that, but I understand what you're saying about the word properly.
Okay,
I suspect the word properly has probably been in there for many generations of this, Julia, at some point, but yeah, we'll go away and tidy that up and come up with a better wording.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, Niamh, did you want to come in on that? You just posted something in the chat.
Hi, John. Yeah, I've just posted a sample condition of what we do put on licenses in conjunction with advice from Thames Valley Police and Trading Standards, what they approve, what we jointly think is a condition that will tie up everything. So basically, staff employed to undergo training upon induction before they are allowed to work. This shall include, but not be limited to, A, dealing with refusal of sales, B, knowledge of the 4 licensing objectives, C, identifying signs of intoxication, D, conflict management, E, how to identify and safeguard vulnerable persons who attend and leave the premises, F, proxy purchasing and identifying attempts by intoxicated persons to purchase alcohol. Such training sessions are to be documented and refreshed every 6 months. All training sessions are to be documented in English. Records of training shall be kept for a minimum of 2 years and be made available to an authorised officer of Bracknell Borough Council or Thames Valley Police on request.
Thank you for that. And if that's the case, then 4.6 should relate to that.
Yeah, totally agree.
I mean, what I suggest, Chair, is we actually put that in.
That's what we're saying, yeah. So 4.6 becomes what Niamh has just read out that we take.
Correct. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Leake.
Thank you, Chairman. I have, could I get clarification on 2 points, please?
Go ahead.
The first one is 2.9. where it says if no representations are received, there is no provision for a licensing authority to impose conditions on a license other than the mandatory conditions and those proposed within the application. Can I ask if that is that a legal restriction? Because it may be apparent that even if there are no representations received, it may be that there is something relating to the provision or the premises which the licensing officer feels should be imposed. Does that clause there mean that even in that case they cannot be imposed?
Sorry, I was having trouble unmuting myself again. Yes, essentially, unless the conditions have been discussed with the applicant and agreed by the applicant, just because the licensing authority wanted the condition on there, that couldn't be done unless there was a hearing, if the applicant didn't want it to be on there.
All right, I'll let that thought roll round while I address the next point, which is on 3.4. That's, forgive me, but that seems to be a bit woolly, because it's implying that even if conditions in the past have not been adhered to, then the licensing authority will expect to be and have taken action to address those. It doesn't say that the application can be refused if they're not addressed. Surely that should be the case. Surely it should say applications will be refused where there are significant outstanding issues.
Again, yes, we could, you're right, it is a bit woolly, isn't it, as to actually what it means. So we could look to
I mean, if there are conditions which have not been adhered to in the past and they're applying for the variation, it seems to me common sense, and the public, I think, would expect that the license be refused until they are corrected.
Also gets that point importantly where, you know, I saw.
Chair, can I make a suggestion on that point? Because obviously I understand very well the point you're making, Councillor Leake. I just wonder whether the reason why it's worded the way it is this issue basically of each case on its merits. And I wonder whether there is maybe this is something we probably just ought to take advice on that very one point, whether it may be something along the lines of would normally be refused under, you know, under normal circumstances would be refused, or something like that. I
understand what you're saying, but
rather than will.
Well, I understand what you're saying, but I'm actually coming from the other direction.
Okay.
And if we've got somebody who has not adhered to conditions in the past, why on earth should we give any discretion about still allowing it to continue? Surely, if the message is, if you do not comply, this application will be refused, is a far stronger message than say, well, we'll think about it, it's a bit of a grey area, because with all due respect, that is then leaving that decision up to the view of a particular licensing officer, which may vary from individual to individual. Surely discretion should only be applied where conditions have been adhered to.
Okay. I mean, Chair, I suggest that we amend in line with that recommendation. I will check that there is no legal bar to that, but assuming that there is no legal bar, because I very much get the point you're making, Councillor Lee, then we'll amend that.
Can I follow on from that, Chair, very quickly? Same point. in legal terms, surely it will be refused unless, you know, there are reasonable grounds to suggest otherwise. So I'm supporting what Ian is saying, but in legal terms, there should be the option of, you know, under normal circumstances, it will be refused unless the applicant can bring forward to the panel, you know, substantial reasons or grounds why, you know, it shouldn't be refused. That would be the normal process in place, I would have thought. Thank you.
I'm quite
Sean,
happy.
do you want to come back on
I'm
that?
quite happy to leave that decision to the officers, depending on what the legal situation is. I take Malcolm's point, but I still come from the point of view that if there is that degree of dubiety, then maybe it should automatically be referred to a panel.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Brunel Walker. Councillor Brunel Walker, please.
On mute, possibly.
He's just put in the chat he can't get off mute. Mark, whilst you're trying to work that out, I'll go to Councillor Kirk, please. And I believe that Malcolm has made Councillor Brunel Walker's point. So we'll move on to Councillor Kirk, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd first of all like to recognise the forensic tests that councillors Allen, Tullett, Leek et al. Have made on a really large document. And it's unsurprising that we're looking at literally what the words actually mean. Very often in statutory interpretation, the literal meaning will fail. You know, people will start saying, what does that particular word actually mean? And this is not uncommon when we look at statutory interpretation. And I think it begs that in a piece of documentation which is so important as a source document, there needs to be clarification in the introduction by our solicitor as to how we actually read legislation. So the first point is, what does it literally mean in the dictionary? If that fails, and often it will do because of the length and the detail of the document, then we look at what was the mischief that the legislators were trying to outlaw. And quite clearly the mischief is we want, you know, compliance and health and safety. And maybe that type of narrative, the introduction, would help people perhaps negotiate quite a wieldy document a lot easier. My fear is if we continue this narrative, and important as it is, you know, we could end up going on for hours and hours just trying to sort of wordsmith a document. But by its very nature, because of its length, the literal interpretation often does fail. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Kirk. Does any other member wish to ask a question? I saw Councillor Ingham's hand up a while ago. Have your points been addressed, Councillor Ingham?
Hello, yes, I took my hand down because the points were covered. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Do any other members have any questions?
Sorry, Chair, can I just go back to what Ian Kirk has just said? What's the outcome to that? Are we actually going to take on board what Councillor Kirk has suggested and actually get this looked at again by the solicitor in those terms?
Sean Murphy, please.
Well, I mean, from what I'm hearing, I mean, the vast majority of the document seems to be accepted as it is. I mean, if I understand rightly, I mean, we're picking up on some of the points here that, and I would, if I'm honest, that the one or two of the bits, particularly that very last point about would be refused, you know, in normal circumstances, that kind of stuff is the kind of stuff that can trip us up if we don't get the wording of that right. So where we have points like that, I would prefer, if possible, to take that back and just get some advice on that suggested amendment, because there is this whole issue. I understand all of the points that have been made about it, but there is this whole issue basically of keeping open kind of options in certain circumstances and all of those things. But I get the point about interpretation.
Can I just ask, Sean?
Yeah, sure, of course.
What is being suggested by Ian Kirk is that actually we're not legally qualified. You know, we're looking at it and giving a best attempt at getting it right. But I take Ian's point that we're not really qualified to do this.
I think the point of Councillor Kirk, I mean, is an important point. I mean, this is a document for Bracknell Forest Council. This is our document basically that tells the world how we as Bracknell Forest Council are going to deliver on the licensing objectives in Bracknell Forest. I mean, the nuance of the wording is one thing. I suppose the overall thrust of the document in terms of is it delivering? Does it set the right priorities? Is this the kind of way that we want to operate our licensing system? Is this how we want to consult? Are these the things that we think are important? And I guess they're the points really that the committee, obviously the committee needs to be comfortable with the wording of the document as best it can. But I mean, the legal element of it has been reviewed, I think, probably not just once, but several times, hasn't it, by the lawyers, Julia, in terms of external lawyers?
Yeah, it has.
So just for clarity, we write the policy as we want to implement the law locally in Bracknell Forest. It then goes away to the solicitors to put our concerns and requirements into legal terms, and it comes back to us, and then we unpick what the legal people have said.
So effectively, yeah. So we reviewed your policy. So we took the policy this year. We decided to have a fundamental review of it. So we used experts to advise on that fundamental review. There have been a number of things which have been amended, a number of things which have been suggested for insertion, one or two things that were suggested for deletion. I think, you know, so there is the wording of the policy, and then there is the overall thrust of the policy. And does it address what you as a committee, as the licensing authority, want to see from effectively a licensing regime implementation in the borough of Bracknell, I guess is the question. The points that have been raised tonight about could this be better worded, that type of stuff, the type of points that members have raised, I think you know, some of that I think we can comfortably turn around and say that actually that kind of amendment, so the suggestion that that Niamh came back about broadening the clause, for example, on training, which I thought was a good example of that. I think we can comfortably put that in and say that that's not going to cause us any legal difficulties. Just the one or two of the kind of more nuanced points, I suggest that basically if the committee are minded to adopt them, that effectively they give us the perhaps delegation to go away and just finalise the exact legal wording of those points before it reappears at council.
Okay, so before it goes to council, when it comes back again from the solicitors, will we have a general statement from the solicitor that it would be sound in legal terms for this policy to be adopted, or words to that, or something like that?
I think we can say that what's before you tonight, subject to those, not even subject to those suggested amendments of Julia, I think what we can say is what's before the committee tonight is a policy that the solicitor has advised us is legally sound. You know, this has been reviewed, as I say, more than once by the solicitor. We've looked at all of the points along the way as we've taken bits in, put bits in and taken bits out, as it were, and made amendments. So I think you're being asked to view a policy or to consider a policy which we would suggest to you, that I would suggest to you, is legally sound, because that's the advice.
Okay, thank you. Just one final point, if you don't mind, Chair, is Sean. Can we rest assured that the legal practice or the courts will allow us the flexibility to operate our policy, as long as it's lawful, how we want to adopt it? We can virtually say what we want, as long as it's reasonable and it complies with the law, as long as it relates to what we want locally. Is that correct?
Yeah, so if you look at the framework around licensing, so you've got the Act itself, the Licensing Act, you've got the statutory guidance under the Act, basically, and you've got the policy. And actually, basically, so some of the points that have been made tonight, the suggestions around insertions about making it clear that basically that only, for example, on the 10, that only the police or environmental health can object to that. That, I would say, is an example, basically, of how the policy has been tailored to meet the law and to meet the statutory guidance. So the three need to fit together, I guess, I suppose, like a jigsaw.
Right.
And I think the fact that we've come back tonight on some of that detail that has been inserted in there to reflect those things, I would suggest basically would imply that basically the policy has been written in a way that it fits with the statutory guidance and the legislation itself.
All right. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you. Councillor Allen, please.
I was just going to rephrase what Malcolm had said. Essentially, we write the policy and then we give it to James Button, who's the expert in licensing law, and he tells us whether it's legal or not, and he tweaks the wording to make sure that it is.
Yeah. And for those of you that have ever listened to James Button, you know he's a very good speaker and he certainly knows his stuff and well respected within the trade. So I think he's probably leading in the industry. Gareth, do you have a question?
Can you hear me, Chair? Thank you.
We can.
I think the comment I want to make is I've listened carefully to all the changes that have been suggested, and I think it does give a very strong and clear Bracknell Forest focus and sets out very clear expectations of what we want. I've been listening to the last few comments, and I think it's entirely reasonable now that we should adopt this policy, for the next stage in the process, which is that we delegate to you following, expert legal comment, to ensure that all that we've written is consistent and legal and defensible in law should the need arise, that those changes then be made, because my concern is that if up to this point we've checked out everything legally, we've made some small but important changes this evening. I think we just need to get those checked out and then the policy should be compliant. My big concern is if we keep on making further adjustments and changes, we risk inadvertently moving further away from what would be defensible. And my understanding of this is actually that's the most important test, reasonableness and defensible in the eyes of the law, should we wish to challenge an applicant's rights to do X, Y, or Z.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Barnard. Councillor Brossard, please.
Thank you for that, Chairman. Gareth Barnard, Dr. Gareth Barnard has made some very good points. I think what we should do, Chairman, given all the cosmetic differences or changes that are proposed, that we should actually leave it to the Chairman to approve the changes, rather than what I think might be proposed is that we should have another meeting. So I would be very happy if those agree with me that the Chairman should actually endorse the recommendations and bring it forward to a conclusion. Thank you, Chairman.
I'd actually suggest that it's the Chairman and Vice Chairman that look at the policy when it comes back after James Button has had a look at it and put the legal twist to it. Are there any other questions, please?
Chair, I think you've got Councillor Kirk and Councillor Finch in the comments.
Okay. Yeah, Councillor Finch, please.
Yes, thanks. It was just to follow up on Councillor Kirk's point. I do recall a licensing meeting where I was in. It wasn't actually this document, it was to do with taxi licensing, where we were faced with a document that had very woolly wording in it, and the solicitor was able to advise us exactly how Councillor Ian Kirk advised us that there were three ways of interpreting the words we had, one of which was definitely not the spirit of why that law was made, so we couldn't go that way. There were two other ways of interpreting it. It looks to me as though the words we have here, there's only one way of seeing how the law interprets it. So to go too further with trying to tie these things up might be counterproductive and unnecessary, as the other councillor said.
Thank you, Councillor Finch. Councillor Kirk.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Finch has really stolen my thunder, so thank you, Alvin. I think there needs to be a piece about how we actually read the interpretation, statutory interpretation, and the solicitor, I think, can do that. I'd say, Sean, if we could reiterate the fact, just a piece around statutory interpretation, and the solicitor will understand that, because it's really vital that all stakeholders understand this. So, yeah, thank you, Chair.
I suggest, I mean, something along the lines, and we will take that advice, but something along the lines that this needs to be read in conjunction with things like the statutory guidance, the law, and the context in which the actual policy is set. So we'll take that back as well when we have those discussions.
Okay. Does any other members have any questions or queries, please? Okay, I see nothing further in the chat, so I'd like to move the recommendation as set out in the report on page 7 of our agenda, with an added bit that it is subject to the changes proposed in agreement with the Chair, Vice Chair, officers and Thames Valley Police.
I'd happily second that, Chair.
Thank you. Do all members agree with the recommendation as set before them? If you object them or want to abstain, please show it in the chat. There are no people wishing to object or abstain, so that is carried. And I now declare the meeting closed, and I'd like to thank everyone for joining this meeting tonight. And in democratic